Hey, this is Rob Anspach, and welcome back to another edition of eHeroes. Today I have Michael Neeley with me, and we're going to talk about podcasting. You know, you've enjoyed all these episodes. This is actually episode 191, and you followed me for many years, but I want to bring on somebody else. I want to get their perspective, how they do things, and what you might learn from this, I think is going to really help, you know, hopefully you start your own podcast. So, Michael, thanks for being here, and you've been kind of bouncing all over the East and West Coast, so I'm kind of glad you made some time for me.
Well, thanks, Rob. I appreciate it, and I super appreciate you having me on. It's an honor to be here on your show and serve you and your guests and your audience. And I'm really a huge fan of the podcasting space. I've been in it for over 8 years now and teaching it for 7 of those, and so I'm excited to share with your tribe, but also just to get to know you better as I've been bouncing back and forth. And we have a mutual connection that's brought me here to the East Coast that hooked us up. So I appreciate that too.
Yeah, and that mutual connection is Krista
Anikovsky.
There you go. And you guys have to go back. I recorded a podcast with her about a year ago. So, 50, 60 episodes ago. Just search. But it was a brilliant episode. But, podcasts have been out for, I don't know, at least a decade.
Oh, longer. They really originated kind of in 2004.
Yeah.
And so we're coming up on 20 years now.
Wow. Yeah, and for those who have read any of my books, you know that I wrote a best-selling book on podcasting back in 2017. So we're going back 5 years. And at that time, I co-wrote the book with Heather Havenwood, and she had been on hundreds and hundreds of podcasts, and I had only been on a couple. But she wanted this book out, so I helped write this book, and and a lot of the things in the book still haven't changed. Showing up to the podcast is a big thing. And it's not necessarily knowing your material, but interacting in such a way that the audience thinks that you know the material.
For sure.
But as we kind of talked off air, my style is just seeing where the conversation goes. I don't make a list of questions because I find that when you do, the podcast doesn't go the way you want, and then the questions are forced, and it's not organic, and it's not real. And your thoughts?
I would agree with that 100%. I started out with a little bit of that edge when I first started podcasting. I launched my first show back in 2014, and I tried a little bit of that for a while, but I did find that you're right. It starts to kind of lock you in, becomes a little stilted, and you miss opportunities to go where the conversation is going to take you. So I threw those out not very long after, I think even near the end of my first season, those were gone. And we're up over 430 some episodes now, and there are no questions predetermined. It's like, what are we going to talk about? Let's have fun.
Yeah. In 2010, I had a podcast called Passions to Profits.
Nice.
And I think I only had 25 episodes before I called it quits. Mm-hmm. And I interviewed some really brilliant people. Joe Sugarman, the CEO of Blue Blockers, the big glasses from the 80s. Mm-hmm. He just recently passed away, but I'm glad I had that recording. And we didn't have video back then. It was all, it was all through the phones, and the quality was horrible. But one of the episodes, I think it was the 3rd or 4th episode, somebody said, "Hey, Rob, I want the questions in advance." And I said, "Really? I don't even know what I'm going to ask you." And I did. I prepared these questions. I submitted them, sent them to him, and as we're having this conversation, he's already prepared these answers. He's spitting them out so quickly, and I'm like trying to pay attention, and I was like, I told him point blank, I can't use this. It just that doesn't sound right. And then he kind of got mad at me and hung up, and that was the end of the.
Hey, you know what? They're lost, and you're right. It's if you give somebody the questions in advance, they try to create their answers, and then they try to adhere or even read what they wrote as an answer. It's like, come on, can't you just take a question and answer naturally with your own mind in that moment? So yeah, I don't like giving people questions in advance either.
I think one of the questions though I get a lot is, if I start a podcast, what do I talk about? And for me, it was like, I'm just going to interview brilliant people who have done what I've done, or are educating people in some way or fashion. And that way I learn, my audience learns. And if they want to hire the person that's sharing that information, great.
Yeah.
And it was never, for me, it was never something I wanted to make money on. It
Right.
was just something that I want to share out to other entrepreneurs. But so the question was, content, where do we get that content? If you're on your own.
Yeah. Well, the way I approach it really is this, Rob, and I know you started your podcast, as you just said, without really having an intention to monetize it. When I teach, and in my podcasting course, and I also have an international best-selling book on it called The Zero to Launch Podcast Accelerator that I published in 2020. And what I teach is reverse engineering. And a good place to start is, how do you want to monetize a show? Even if you're not really, that's the big plan, at least to kind of look at it so that, hey, if you could make some money along the way, why not? And so I teach 7 different ways to monetize podcasts. And and they're uniquely different. They're not like sell this, sell that, because those are all still, it's selling something versus other methods. But with the reverse engineering, and when you're looking for content, I always teach my clients, like, what's a possible way to make money from your podcast? Figure that out, and then go, okay, well, who would spend that money with you? Where would that money come from? Then create the show that will attract that audience. And so depending on that methodology, it could change. And I think we chatted about this a little bit. I have 4 podcasts of my own and 2 more in development, and each of them makes money in different ways.
4, almost 6 of them.
About to be 6.
I think recording, this one sometimes takes up a lot of time. But I batch record. So, what that means is, I'll take, 6 or 7 of them and record in 1 week, and then I don't have to worry about it for a couple of weeks. I used to do 1 a week, and then people will go, hey, Rob, I can't make it. And I'm like, all right, what do I do this week? And then there was a lull in between episode 33 and 34. It's like 6 months I took off because I couldn't find people that, but the funny thing is once I got past episode 100, everybody's raising their hand. Rob, I want to be on your podcast. Where were you, at the beginning? So it's, I think that and I tell people, look, your first 100 episodes aren't going to be that great. At least I didn't think they were.
No,
I had some good people, talented people on the show. But it wasn't until I got past that 100 episode that I felt confident. I felt comfortable. I could ad lib. I can do all kinds of stuff. And, I do this a lot, shake my hands. And people are like, well, Rob, that was just an awesome interview. And I'm like, okay, I just didn't really do anything different than I was before, but I just feel more confident about it.
Yeah, well, and I equate it to kind of like this. If you learn to ride a bicycle, okay, you got to get past that hoop and you get that balance down and you learn to ride a bike. But now if you stop and you sit and think about everything, thinking about it's not going to make you a better bicyclist. Now you're going to get better by riding the bike every day. And it's like a podcast. You'll just keep getting better interview after interview after interview. And you're right, 100 episodes. And I'm still learning stuff, by the way. So, it's crazy.
But, with 6 podcasts almost, you kind of cover the gamut of everything. I mean, you got to be talking about all kinds of information, not just podcasts, but do you have a limit of what you can and can't talk about?
It will depend on the show. So as an example, I'm wearing my t-shirt for one of my podcasts right now, which I don't know if anybody will see the video of this, but it's my Something to Wine About podcast. And that show is a passion project. I love wine. I collect wine. And I created the show. One of the methods of monetization I teach is called Freebies and Writeoffs. And if you're in the wine industry, by the way, having a wine podcast makes me an industry professional. When I go to wine country, I never pay for tastings, which saves me a bundle right there.
Wow.
And I get a 30% discount on wine purchases, sometimes even higher. Some of the wineries we go to and interview, they give us 50% off. So I'm saving all kinds of money on this show, which is just a passion project. It's have fun, talk to the people. I don't care if we have an audience of 1 or 1,000. It doesn't matter. I'm still in the industry.
Wow.
So that one, we talk about wine, but there are other shows that we do different things. So it really varies.
Yeah, I saw some of your pictures on Facebook, and I thought, wow, that's kind of fascinating. And I guess the way you do it, I mean, it looked like everybody had a mic, and you're
Exactly.
reviewing right there.
Exactly. Yeah, we call that our road kit, and we bring along 4 microphones because it's myself and 2 co-hosts, and then we have the fourth microphone for whoever we're interviewing it, whether it is the winemaker or the ownery of the ownery of the wine, the owner of the winery. So and we'll do it right there on premises, and they roll out the red carpet for us. I mean, a lot of times they even feed us and treat us to all the great wine, send us home with a couple of free bottles as well. It's always really a
Wow.
lovely experience.
Now you talk about co-hosts, and
Mhm.
my experience with co-hosts, sometimes it's not always the best. It's kind of like having a partner in business. How do you select the right co-host? Because
Yeah.
I know some people, had brilliant podcasts, but they're constantly, the co-host door is always revolving.
Yeah. Well, that kind of happened with this show. The show originated. I knew I wanted to host a wine podcast, and I'd known this for a while. I'd already had my first show, Consciously Speaking Out, and I think I'd even had my second one, Buy This, Not That. And I knew I wanted to do a wine podcast, but I didn't want to do it solo. It wouldn't be as much fun. It's a social thing.
Right.
And I was at a dinner at an event for New Media Summit. I was one of the featured icons of influence there. And we were having a dinner one evening with a bunch of the other podcast icons. And I said, man, I really want to start this wine show, but I know I need a host and preferably someone who knows podcasting. So I'm not the one carrying all the weight. And Melanie Benson, I don't know if you know her, was sitting right across from me. She raises her hand and says, I'll do it. I'll do it. So she jumped in. We created the show. We were the original 2. Then what happened was after we did the first few interviews, we found that due to the distance between us, Melanie just wasn't really available. And JJ Flazanes started doing some of the shows with us. And then Melanie was available. So then it became just JJ and I. And then so it became the 3 of us. And then JJ's partner, Doug, was showing up more and more, and still no Melanie. So Melanie dropped out and Doug came on board. And because the 3 of us really love wine, it's been going smoothly ever since that. And I don't see that revolving door switching anymore because we've got a pretty solid group now.
Well, not everybody can do that. I think. I think you have more of the energy to go out and do. I think, and I granted I've been doing this for 4 years, and prior I had the other podcast, so I'm kind of experienced in doing some of these things. But I think some of the struggle that I see entrepreneurs that get in the podcasting space and they record 5 or 6 episodes, and then they're like, now what? I'm not getting traction. I'm not getting monetization. I'm not getting, feedback or reviews or whatever. So they quit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if you listen to their podcast, it's really good material. They just quit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so prevalent in our industry that they've coined the term podfading. And it's because seriously, it's like 70+% of shows do not make it past 7 episodes.
Yeah.
And it's phenomenal. And even the shows that are out there right now, there's only about 2 million podcasts currently out there, a little over, and only 27% of those have put out any new content in the last 90 days. So that's crazy. Yeah. And I think what happens, Rob, is that kind of like what you said, they're not getting traction. They're not figuring out their way to monetize. And I think the big challenge is they did not start with a plan. Yeah. Because honestly, podcasting is easy. Anybody can throw up a podcast literally in a few minutes.
Anybody can do it.
Same here. We could do it in a matter of minutes. We could create a new show right now together. We could have it up there and on Apple Podcasts and everything within a day or 2.
Yeah.
And it's so easy, but the challenge is that people don't know how to monetize it. They don't know strategy. They don't know how to do audience growth techniques. And part of that is how I got into coaching it, because I figured all these things out real early on. And I was in these podcast groups and other people were going, how the hell did you do that? Consciously Speaking's got over 2 million downloads. And they're like, what did you do? So I started sharing about that. And then I realized there's a need here for some more in-depth coaching. And that's when I created my training program, also called the Zero to Launch Podcast Accelerator.
Yeah, for me, my background is doing SEO for companies. And I knew that when I wanted to launch this podcast, I came up with the name eHeroes, and I'm like, well, I'm going to put my name on top so people can find me, because they're always, searching my name anyway for my books. And so I thought, well, I don't want to just do it audio anymore. That's old school. Let's do it video and audio. And so now my video's on YouTube, the audio's on like two dozen different podcasts. And the thing is, only probably 5 of them are worth their salt anyway. You know, Apple and Amazon and Spotify. Great, I'm on there. The rest of it is just for SEO, because people are going to search me and they're going to find me somewhere. You know, if they do listen, great. But, you know, so, you know, for me, it was just, I guess, easier, you know, but there are a lot of people who overthink it. And they're like, well, I got this great idea for a podcast. And then they spend 3 hours looking for names to see if they're going to match. Then they don't do it because someone else has the name. And I'm like, just put your name on.
Well, yeah. And the challenge too, Rob, is they worry about the little stuff that doesn't matter. I mean, people who struggle with their title, I have to remind them all the time, you can change the title of your show every day of the week if you want to. Don't let it stop you from launching. Right. You can change your artwork every day of the week. It's like, forget about the little things that don't matter. Start to grow that audience. And another piece of kind of what you said there about, like, you know, you started it and you kind of, you know, you had the tenacity to stick it out. Right. There are many people who start it, and well, even myself as an example, when I first launched in 2014, I knew very little about the space. Mm-hmm. A friend said, oh, you should launch a podcast. And within 2 weeks, I launched my first show, but I didn't know what I was doing. Kind of like a lot of people do. And I was sporadically releasing episodes and all this. And then I saw a webinar. And then I go, what? Oh, you could make money with a podcast? There's all this other stuff in it. So I shut down my show, got a mentor, relaunched about a month later with a 7-day-a-week show. And that's when things really took off for me. And I would suggest this to anyone who's starting. Just save yourself a lot of time and money, cut the learning curve, get a mentor, sign up for a course, something, get in there to learn it, and you will do so much better than if you just kind of wing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, I've learned from various people and what they do, and I look at what they do, and some of it, you know, I kind of cringe because I'm thinking, what'd you do that for? But yeah, you have to, and whatever you do it based on your personality. And I'm very sarcastic, so I wanted to show that you know, if I get a little sarcastic on my show, my audience isn't going to care because they know who I am. Right. But then there are other people going, oh, you can't curse on my show, and I want you to wear a suit and tie when you come on. I'm like, really? It's not me. That's your audience is not going to see that. I mean, if they know me, they're not going to see me. They're not going to want to hear me, you know, dressed up in a suit. And right. I think everything you do has to match what you do in real life.
It really does. And a big challenge that I think a lot of people have with that is they go out and they go, oh, well, I want everybody to like me. And I'm like, give that up right away. You're literally better off to polarize your audience. Some people will love you. Some people will hate you. But just being liked middle of the road so that everybody likes you, you're going to be so milquetoast that nobody's going to want to listen to you.
Right. And you know, just because Joe Rogan made $1 billion on podcasts doesn't mean you're going to. But here's the thing is that, you know, a lot of the people that I've interviewed, you know, either become my client or they refer me to somebody that becomes a client. In fact, I had one gentleman, he said, you know, the interview that we did a few years ago, he said, I had someone hire me and I'm going to send you a check for the commission. I said, well, I don't need it. But I opened the mail one day and there it was, and it was a substantial amount. And I'm like, yeah, great. I mean, but, you know, it's, and I think people look at everything and they say, well, you know, it's expensive. Well, really, it's not. I created my own website just for the podcast, and then I send that feed out to the various podcasts. But then there's people who pay, you know, $50, $60 a month to be hosted somewhere. Problem is, when you stop making that payment, guess what? Your podcast disappears. So for me, it was always about controlling my platform and putting content where I wanted to control it.
Yeah. And it's not expensive at all. It's such a cheap, easy medium to get into. I literally, sometimes I'm dumbfounded at the number of entrepreneurs, at least out there, who don't have their own podcast because it's such a great lead generation, you know, device. So
You know, we don't always have time to make videos to put on YouTube. You know, but here's the thing: is that create this video just like we are right now on this on this podcast, and then you have a video for YouTube. You can transcribe it. Now you have content.
Do whatever you want with it.
A blog, or you know, transcribe all your episodes, and now you have a book.
Yep.
You know, you can create dozens of content from one podcast.
Yep, exactly. And if someone, like you just said, if they don't have time to do, or the skill set even to do the video edit of it, just when I started, it was just all audio. I mean, literally, I was recording over Skype without a camera on or anything. I was recording episodes in my pajamas, because it's also great because you can work from anywhere in the world and, you know, keep that camera off, and you can be naked if you want to, but you're just recording the voice. Audio edit's a lot easier. Pop it out there and go to town with it. And it's a great medium because of that too, because people can listen to it. They can consume it while they're working out, while they're on their drive, while they're at the gym, they're on a run, whatever. It makes it easy to consume as well.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of those podcast channels on, you know, on my car. In my car, I can just.
That's when I listen.
Although my kids are like, Dad, I don't want to listen to you. Put something else on.
Yeah.
You know. So you know, for me, it was always something that I wanted to complement my own business. But you have 6 of them now. Do you cross promote?
I will if it's a natural fit. Now, some of my shows don't really fit well with each other. So one of my shows is in the woo-woo space, we'll call it. That's the consciously speaking. And to translate that over to the wine podcast doesn't necessarily work that well. But you know what? In our wine podcast, and my co-host, by the way, between the 3 of us, we host over 20 different podcasts, and we'll mention one of our other shows from time to time, and maybe people will hear it and go listen. But the other cool thing too, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, is your name and your podcast. Well, author title, like who you are as an author, is searchable in all of these platforms like Apple and Spotify. If someone searches Michael Neeley, all my shows are going to show up. So that's also a value just right there. Yeah,
I mean, we're very narcissistic people. We want to see our name in lights. No, it's, well, you know, and the thing is, you know, I'm for me, it was always about helping other entrepreneurs grow, and you know, getting that entrepreneurial spirit to learn from everybody, and you know, I get more information from these podcasts than a lot of people realize. It's not just me interviewing people, you know, but it was always about, you know, learning from interesting people.
Absolutely.
You know, and whether they're in the woo-woo space or the wine space or, you know, the author space or SEO, doesn't matter. I interview my competitors too. Well, here's the thing about competitors. You know, sometimes I use that word loosely. For me, there is nobody that does what I do in the manner I do it.
Exactly.
So, you know, if you want to hire somebody you think that looks like me or does whatever I do, go for it. I don't care. I'm out to help everybody grow their business, make money. There's plenty of money in this world. Why not spread it around?
Yeah, well, and you look at it too, and I'm with you 100% on this. I'll use the word competition loosely, like you, but the truth is, it's like if you've got an automotive company, you know, you sell Honda or Mazda, where are you going to set up shop? You're going to set up shop right next to the Toyota dealership, because you know that people are there to check out cars, and you all win when you kind of put it together. So my co-hosts of Something to Whine About, they also teach podcasting. So it's like it's really a matter of a deep understanding too. I'm not a great fit for everybody. And but they know the one thing I do get with people who get on my list, and, you know, especially if they sign up for one of my free gifts or something, I know they're interested in podcasting. And maybe they don't get my program, but then maybe they're interested in my partner's program from one of my other shows. So it's not a competition in that respect.
No, and I think no matter what podcast is out there, you know, at least listen to it once, you know, because you're going to gain some information that maybe you didn't know before. You know, maybe I don't really care for the woo-woo stuff, but I've brought people on my podcast that talk about woo-woo stuff, and I'm like, wow, okay, I didn't know that. That's kind of fascinating. Or, you know, I'm never going to have them on the podcast again. You know, I still share the information out because there's people out there that need it.
Exactly. And even with my show, Consciously Speaking, I mean, I think I said that in one of my early things is like, hey, I maybe bring people on that I don't agree with at all, but I want you to hear and make up your own mind.
Yeah.
So, it's important is what we do as podcasters. We're the curators. We're helping people to get more information.
So, the bottom line question, though, with 6 podcasts, does it make you money? Does it give you, a profitable living?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I just did a talk yesterday on podcasting, and I love this fact that when I left my job, I had a high-tech startup company before I got into podcasting space.
Mm-hmm.
And I was making decent money in there. I make way more money now running podcasts, doing what I love, creating shows, creating content and material that's out there to the public. And I absolutely love it. And I also have this other piece, which I think you enjoy as well, is a freedom lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Like you mentioned, I'm right now in Florida, but I also have my home in Santa Cruz, and we travel around, and I could work anywhere in the world. I plan to spend a month in Italy later this year. It gives you that freedom. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is that, a lot of people who know me know that in my past life, I had a local service cleaning business. And I had that for almost 19 years. And it was 18 years too long, according to my wife. But I was always plugged into that business. If I took vacation, I was always worried about this local business, which was terrible. But in the meantime, I was creating this coaching business that the businesses overlapped for about 10 years. When my first book came out, I said, cleaning business is gone. And I sold it to somebody, and I didn't care what happened to it. But I took this business. I can go anywhere.
Yeah.
I've been to Italy. I've been to Germany. I've been all over the United States. All I need is a cell phone and a computer.
That's it.
And, if I'm on vacation, I'll work 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening, I'm done. And then I get to enjoy the rest of the day. And it's so nice to have that freedom. And that's, as an entrepreneur, that's why I became an entrepreneur. It wasn't for the money. It wasn't for the notoriety or the authority or credibility. It was for the freedom to do what I wanted to do.
And when you want to do it. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's the same with me. And I absolutely love it. And I've created a really, designed, I should say, an ideal lifestyle for myself. And I'm just happy to be reaping that in and helping others now to do the same. So
yeah. And just looking at your pictures that you post and Krista posts, you guys are just living life. I mean, it was just, I saw you on the boats. I saw you doing this and that. And I'm like, that's what you design a business for.
Exactly.
Your business is supposed to fund your personal life, not the opposite.
Right. Right. And we're very blessed to be doing it that way. And the fact that we found each other and it's just all working out so beautifully. And we're just creating now together a life that we love. So it's awesome.
So how do people find you? Where do they go?
Well, obviously, they could go to my website, michaelneeley.com. But, I'll tell you, one of the things that I even teach people is like, my website is not where my people find me typically. I do events like this. I get on podcasts. I speak on people's stages. I do my own events. And one of the things that I like to give people who are interested in this is a free gift. It's the simple 5-step process to launch a rockin' podcast in just 14 days. And of course, I called it that because it was 14 days when I first launched mine. But I'd be happy to give that to any of your listeners who want it. We'll just, make that link available in the chat. Or if they want, if you remember, I don't know how you do it with on your screen stuff, but it's podquest.net/live. But either that or we could put it in the chat because I know people may be driving as they're listening to this or not available right now. But yeah, get that thing. And if you want to start a podcast, it's a great little kickoff to give you some concepts about how to do it quickly and easily. And happy to support people.
Well, on the video, you'll see the link below. And
Perfect.
Then on the audio, they'll just have to remember it. And if they're driving, pull to the side, write your notes down. Or if you're me, I put the knee up on the steering wheel and
try to mangle it in. Yeah. Well, then in that case, I'll say it once more. PodQuest, not cast, quest, like you're on a quest to have a podcast, podquest.net/gift. Pretty simple.
There you go. See, I would have messed all. I would have that rewind. What did he say? Oh, not guest.
What did he say again? Yeah.
So this was great. I mean, we could talk podcasting all day
Oh,
long.
absolutely.
And
Well, and speaking of that, I do want to have you on my show, the PodQuest Show. So that's why I use that link, PodQuest Show, where we talk about podcasting. That
there you
show
go.
is entirely about the podcasting space. Would love to have you on there, talk about your journey, especially because you even had an earlier podcast, like I said, back in
Yeah.
2010. So that'd be a
Yeah,
great
you know,
conversation.
and it's sad because 2 or 3 of the people I interviewed back in 2010 are no longer with us. And,
Wow.
you know, but I look back and, you know, out of these 191 and soon to be, you know, more episodes that I've recorded, you know, I look back on some of the people I've interviewed and some of them aren't in business anymore. You know, they moved on, you know, they're not in, you know, not in the space that they used to be. They're doing something completely different. And people say, why don't you take those videos down? Or why don't you take those podcasts down? I'm like, why? Still good content. It doesn't matter if the people aren't still with us or doing whatever they're doing. You know, they had an idea. They had this brilliant concept, and I want to know more about it. And it could help somebody. You know, I had interviewed somebody a while back. It was someone called me up and they said, Rob, they kind of screwed me. Can you take their video down and can you take their I said, you know, I don't know what happened, what transpired.
Mm-hmm.
That's between
Wow.
you and them. But I provide the podcast, and you know, it's kind of up to you to do your due diligence.
Right. Well, and Rob, you reminded me of something else too that I think is valuable to let people know, and that is podcasting as a legacy. And
Mm-hmm.
as you mentioned that several of the people that you interviewed are no longer with us. Well, she was a rock star client of mine. I helped her launch her show called Living the Ascension.
Mm-hmm.
And she passed away over the holidays. And you know what? She only had like, I think 4 or 5 episodes posted, but they were valuable episodes for
Yeah.
people. And so I reached out to Libsyn, who is our hosting platform. And I asked Libsyn, I said, hey, I'd be willing to pay because as you mentioned, if you don't continue to pay your monthly fee, it could go away. But Libsyn has a deal. If you're not posting new material, you drop down to the $5 a month plan.
Yeah.
And so I reached out to Libsyn and said, I will pay the $5 a month. That's $60 a year. I'll give you $600. Let's keep it going for another 10 years. Even though she's no longer with us, I want those episodes to stay live because they're evergreen, really.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things I love about Libsyn. They wrote back to me and they said, we'll just cover it and we'll keep it up there. Yeah. So that was just that, you know, they're a very podcast centric platform. And now her show, even though she's no longer with us, her episodes will be there for a long time.
And you brought up a good thing. And I know that we're running out of time, but I wanted to focus on the word legacy. You know, I focused on in my book, No Experience Necessary. And although the book centered on social media, it was all about using social media to build your legacy. Podcasting is the same way. You know, you want to be able to leave a footprint somewhere in society that people can go back to and say, wow, you know, Rob contributed or Michael contributed. This is what's going on. This is what we can learn from. You know, a lot of people just don't think about the legacy they're going to leave behind. They think about, oh, well, you know, whatever. And,
you
know, to me, it's the people that really are concerned about what the next generation does are the ones that are going to actually, you know, contribute the most.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%.
So I want to thank the audience and, you know, go over to Michael's podcast, especially the wine one. I think that's awesome. I just think that, hey, if you're going to create something, you might as well get something free out of it. I mean, to me, that's
absolutely.
So I'm not a big, you know, alcohol drinker. I haven't been for a long time. It just messes with me too much, and I'm a terrible drunk. So we won't go into that one. But you know, it all in moderation, right?
Exactly.
So, but yeah, go over to his website, podquest.net/gift, right?
Yep, you got it.
And we'll see everybody on the next episode. Adios.